Tonight at 10:10, millions of rail passengers face severe disruption with new strike action in the lead-up to Christmas. Industrial action will take place in 4 periods in December and January. The RMT union claims a likely deal is being blocked.
We have been reasonable, but it is impossible to find a negotiated settlement when the dead hand of the government is presiding over and blocking a resolution.
The dispute is over jobs and pay and working conditions. The train companies say that strike action will not bring about change.
Putting strike action on will not resolve that situation. It's actually sitting at the table and making sure that we can try and get a final agreement.
We'll be asking why it's proving so difficult to resolve things. Also tonight, more controversy in Qatar, but there's no dispute about the quality of the football. At home, Cristiano Ronaldo is to leave Manchester United with immediate effect, following his outspoken interview about the club and its manager. And the first state visit of the King's reign, as the President of South Africa is welcomed with full ceremony.
And on BBC London, the soon-to-be father who was fatally stabbed at the Notting Hill Carnival. We speak to his family as police appeal for help to catch his killer.
Good evening. The 12 days leading to Christmas and the first week of the new year are likely to bring severe disruption for millions of rail passengers, with 4 periods of strike action announced by the RMT trade union. Services have already been badly disrupted in recent months in a long-running dispute over pay and working conditions and job security. The RMT says that the latest action will send a clear message that staff want a better deal. The union's members at Network Rail and 14 train companies voted last week in favour of renewed action. Now, the industrial action will take place during 4 48-hour periods. They'll be on the 13th and 14th of December and then again on the 16th and 17th of December. And then on we go into the new year, early in the new year, on the 3rd and 4th of January and again on the 6th and 7th of January. And then on top of all that, there's to be an overtime ban over Christmas and the new year, which means that there'll be industrial action of some kind taking place over a period of 4 weeks. More than 40,000 RMT members are expected to take part. Our transport correspondent Katie Austin has the latest.
Christmas is coming,
come all the way round.
But so are more train strikes.
This latest round of strikes will show how important our members are to the running of the country and will send a clear message that we want a good deal on job security, pay and conditions for our people. We have been reasonable, but it is impossible to find a negotiated settlement when the dead hand of the government is presiding over and blocking a resolution in these talks.
2.5 weeks ago, the RMT called off 3 strike dates and unions and rail employers went into intensive negotiations. Today, instead of a breakthrough, the dispute has intensified. The strike days announced will come at a crucial time of year for retailers and hospitality venues and disrupt the festive plans of millions of passengers.
The government does have final sign-off on what's agreed, but says it is not holding up negotiations, and it's for the employers and unions to come to an agreement between them that is fair to workers, taxpayers and passengers. The rail industry argues reforms need to be agreed to afford pay rises after the pandemic left the railway in a precarious financial hole.
After the talks,
the Rail Delivery Group speaks for train companies.
I think there's frustrations on both sides. You know, as RMT are looking to get a pay offer, we are looking still to try and manage the final details of any reform deal.
Mick Lynch said today that he'd spoken to you and you had said you couldn't make an offer because the government wouldn't let you. Is that correct?
I don't get into the details of what we said and what we didn't say. You know, at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is to work with RMT to ensure that we stop these strikes. And that's the important thing. We have to stop the strikes.
Businesses which depend on people coming to visit, like those in Blackpool, see today's news as a blow to their festive season.
We are feeling the effects of the cost of living. Every time we go out buying food, the costs have gone up and up and up. All our bills are increasing. Anything, again, that is going to knock us back at that time is going to have a huge detrimental impact financially.
The Transport Secretary is expected to meet the RMT's Mick Lynch later this week, but as things stand, more travel misery lies ahead.
And with me in the studio is Katie with all the latest analysis. For those watching, and there'll be many people watching, thinking now about their journeys at Christmas and New Year, wondering what on earth is the exact obstacle here? Where is the blockage? What would you say?
Well, if you speak to Network Rail and the Rail Delivery Group, they insist real progress was made in the talks over the past couple of weeks. The RMT has said, though, that new firm proposals it hoped for or expected didn't materialise, and only last week it announced that its members had voted in favour of further strike action, potentially for another 6 months. And if you listen to Mick Lynch speaking today, it wasn't the tone of a man who believed a deal was imminent. Now, the government is largely in control of the railway and its finances now, but ministers have very deliberately kept their distance from the negotiations in this dispute, saying it's just not their place to intervene directly in those talks. It's on Thursday, though, that we are set to see that meeting between the RMT's Mick Lynch and the Transport Secretary Mark Harper. That was actually really set up as an introductory meeting. Mark Harper was only appointed last month, but given these latest developments, they will clearly have a lot to discuss.
Katie, once again, many thanks. Katie Austin there, our transport correspondent. Now, in Qatar, the Football World Cup has featured one of the biggest shocks in the history of the tournament when Saudi Arabia stunned the former world champions Argentina, beating them by 2-1. Saudi Arabia ranked 51st in the world, while Argentina, of course, has a squad of stars seen as contenders for the trophy. We'll have more on the play in a moment, because the controversy surrounding this World Cup is still very much in evidence, with a continued dispute about the right of players to wear the One Love armband and a complaint from Welsh fans who were told to remove their rainbow hats before being allowed into yesterday's game. Our sports editor Dan Rowan reports.
It's one of the most politically charged events in sports history, from player protests and concerns over Qatar's human rights record to accusations of Western hypocrisy.
This moral lesson giving, one-sided.
And now another controversy. Former Wales footballer Laura McAllister, a gay woman, claiming she was asked to remove her rainbow-coloured bucket hat, which shows support for the LGBTQ+ community, as she entered a stadium here in a country where being gay is illegal. Today, in a statement, the Football Association of Wales said it was extremely disappointed by reports that members of its supporters club, which included FAW staff members, were asked to remove and discard their rainbow wall bucket hats before entry to the stadium. Following Wales' draw against the US last night, the governing body said it had gathered information and would be addressing the matter directly with FIFA. Today, the head of European football's anti-discrimination body told me he was concerned.
What's happening now is also a sort of a struggle for security control of the stadiums. So a very confusing picture, and a picture actually that shows much of the political dynamics around this tournament. Who actually is in control now the tournament started? Is it FIFA or is it the Qataris?
This comes after England, Wales and a group of other European teams drew to book captains, and tonight one player from another of those teams made clear his dismay.
I'm afraid if I say something about this, whether or not I'll be able to play on the field tomorrow. Unfortunately, this is a situation I've never experienced in football. We are being controlled.
And this morning, America's top diplomat in Doha for talks with his Qatari counterpart criticised FIFA's stance.
It's always concerning from my perspective when we see any restrictions on freedom of expression. It's especially so when the expression is for diversity and for inclusion. And in my judgment, at least, no one on a football pitch should be forced to choose between supporting these values and playing for their team.
While some say that this is no place for a World Cup, others fear that sport is now in danger of becoming too politicised. And certainly the Qatari authorities have said that some of the criticism that they've received is hypocritical and prejudiced, and that not enough credit is given to this World Cup as a force for change and unity.
Over the last 2 years, we have been on a journey to understand and learn more about the situation in Qatar.
Australia's players criticised Qatar's human rights record in a recent video, but their sports minister told me a clash of cultures can be navigated.
When you try and grow the game and go to new territories like this, who's it incumbent on to compromise?
Everybody should probably yield a little bit. And if you look at what's happened here in Qatar, I mean, some of these labour laws that they have now passed, they've now legislated international law, are region leading with respect to workers' rights. And from Western democracies that want workers' rights improved, that's a great thing. So we probably should do more to acknowledge that progress.
Well, as we know, there's no question that Qatar's record on the rights of women and LGBT plus groups, not to mention its treatment of migrant workers, means that many fans have deep misgivings about Qatar's hosting of the World Cup. But there is an important question about how significant Qatar's relationship with the UK is. Our global trade correspondent, Darshini David, is with me to explain a little more. Darshini.
Thank you. Yes, even if you're not visiting for the World Cup, chances are you may be connected to Qatar without even leaving home. And that's because Qatar, a country that is actually smaller than Wales, owns one of the world's largest natural gas reserves, producing 77 million tonnes per year. Well, around half of our gas is imported. About half of that comes via pipeline from Norway, but it's Qatar that typically takes second place on that list, supplying perhaps 9% of our energy imports. Now, in theory, that is capable of fueling around 1 million British homes, and that could rise as we look to secure more supply as North Sea reserves dwindle and we move away from Russia. Also, Qatar could be a key part of Europe's energy security plan too. Now, while Italy bought more of its gas than we did in 2021, it only accounted for 5% of the EU's total gas imports. But the bloc's biggest gas guzzler, Germany, is haggling for a deal with Qatar to help replace Russian gas. And with even more sold to Asia and also Qatar seeing those soaring prices, it earned over $50 billion from selling energy, and that's just in the first half of this year. It also plans to double its output in coming years to reap the rewards as buyers scramble to secure supplies. Just yesterday, China struck a deal to buy $60 billion worth of Qatari gas over 27 years. And already, Qatar is recycling some of those earnings in ways to increase its profile and its influence. Just here, over £40 billion have been invested in the UK. The Qatari government has significant shareholdings in the likes of Barclays Bank, Sainsbury's, Heathrow Airport, even the water company Severn Trent. It doesn't stop there. Its immense property holdings include prestige landmarks such as London Shard, also Harrods and even Canary Wharf. Also, earlier this year, the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson trumpeted an agreement for Qatar to invest up to £10 billion over the next 5 years in the UK. And that's in sectors ranging from cybersecurity to life sciences. Well, this tiny country has both the cash and the energy we want. Like it or not, our relationship with Qatar seems set to become even closer. Hugh.
Darshini, many thanks again. Darshini David there with thoughts on the links with Qatar. Well, as I mentioned earlier, there was a stunning win for Saudi Arabia against Argentina, one of the favourites for the Cup. But the Saudis surprised everyone with the resilience that they showed. Our sports correspondent, Andy Swiss, was watching.
They've turned the World Cup upside down. A day of Saudi celebration after one of the biggest shocks the tournament has ever seen. The rank outsiders were up against one of the favourites, Argentina, and the mighty Lionel Messi. And when Argentina's first defeat for some 3 years, and for the Saudi fans, a moment to say, I was there.
I am very, very happy. Saudi 2, Argentina 1.
Crazy, like the stadium erupted. Yeah, it was so fun.
First now in the group, and they will take final World Cup.
For Saudi Arabia then, a day to go down in footballing folklore, one they and their supporters will never forget. Andy Swiss, BBC News.
Rescuers in Indonesia are working through a second night to try to pull survivors from the rubble after an earthquake struck the West Java province. Officials say around 268 people, many of them children, have died. Damaged roads and the vast size of the affected area making it difficult to locate and help victims. The United Kingdom must end its dependency on immigration, the words of the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, who told business leaders today that the days of cheap labour, as he put it, had to end. But he accepted the need for skilled foreign workers and promised a pragmatic approach to immigration by a Labour government. Sir Keir refused to commit to an overall reduction in immigration. He told our political editor Chris Mason that he didn't want to give a fixed number.
Plenty of businesses, urban and rural, are crying out for more workers. Today, farmers gathered to talk about the problem.
There's a strong chance that we'll put our business out of business. It's very difficult to see a way forward when we have no clear idea how we're going to recruit next year, and when the cost, the inflation that's built into that workforce every year is going up in double digits.
And are the politicians listening?
It doesn't feel like it to me.
Enter Keir Starmer talking to business leaders and trying to lay on the charm.
Labour is ready, but a party that is proud of being pro-business, that respects the contribution profit makes to our jobs growth and our tax base.
But Labour are determined to learn a lesson of Brexit, a concern about too much immigration.
Our common goal must be to help the British economy off its immigration dependency, to start investing more in training workers who are already here.
What a change. Yes, it's been in the offing for a while, but it's worth emphasising what this amounts to. From a party that oversaw a huge increase in immigration from Central and Eastern Europe less than 2 decades ago, and from a man who, when he campaigned for the Labour leadership 3 years ago, advocated maintaining freedom of movement with the European Union. So what does Keir Starmer say to those businesses desperate to bring in more workers from abroad? You're effectively saying no, or not as much as they would like.
Well, what I'm saying is we've got to look at the short term, but we can't always just have a sticking plaster.
Is immigration right now too high?
If what's driving it is a skills failure, then we need to address that. And that means, Chris, that in areas where we're over-reliant on immigration because we haven't fixed the skills problem, I'd like to see that immigration come down.
I'm not sure that was an answer, though. Is it too high?
Well, Chris, I'm not going to pluck an arbitrary number and say that's the right number.
But do you want it to come down?
If one of the drivers of immigration is that we've got hundreds of thousands of people who were in the workforce just 2 or 3 years ago and now aren't because they can't get access to health treatment or mental health treatment, I want to fix that problem.
I just have one more go. Do you want it to come down, the level of
In some areas it will come down. You know, over the last few years we've had arbitrary figures plucked out the air and that hasn't worked for anyone.
Plenty here don't buy Keir Starmer's argument about immigration, but they are giving Labour a fresh look. Chris Mason, BBC News in Birmingham.
Now, within the past couple of hours, the US Supreme Court has ordered former President Trump to release his tax returns to a congressional committee. The move is a significant setback for Mr. Trump, who's tried for years to shield his tax returns from public scrutiny. He had argued that the request by a panel led by a Democrat was politically motivated. Well, let's turn to our North America correspondent, Gary O'Donoghue, who's in Washington. Well, Gary, what do we make of this?
Hugh, Donald Trump has fought this moment tooth and nail ever since that moment he came down the escalator in Trump Tower and announced he was running for president, defying decades of precedent for presidential candidates to release their tax returns to public scrutiny, arguing all the while that he was under audit and therefore couldn't do so. His opponents saying he didn't want to release them because he'd overinflated ideas of his net worth and had possibly underpaid his taxes. Well, now he's run out of legal road and the Treasury Department will have to hand over 6 years' worth of tax returns to a Democrat-controlled Congress. However, that Democrat-controlled Congress only remains Democrat-controlled for a few weeks until the turn of the year when the Republicans take over, having won the midterm election. So the clock is ticking for Democrats to get their hands on these documents and make something of them before Christmas. As for the former president himself, he said nothing about what's happened today. He's kept absolutely quiet about it. But this is yet another legal decision that's gone against him, one of many in recent months. Hugh.
Gary, thanks again for the update. Gary O'Donoghue there, correspondent in Washington. Now, in recent months, we've been reporting on the drought in Somalia, the worst to hit the country in decades. Growing numbers of children are dying, hundreds of thousands of people are displaced, and they're facing famine. And the situation is made much worse by the ongoing civil war between the Somali government and the Islamic fundamentalist group called Al-Shabaab. But there are signs that the government is gaining the upper hand in that fight as communities start to unite against the militants. Now, Al-Shabaab has been active in the country for more than 15 years. It controls large areas of rural Somalia, and they're mostly represented by these blobs of grey on the map there. So it's quite a lot of land. It's estimated that more than half the population affected by the current drought is in areas controlled by the militants. BBC has gained rare and exclusive access to Danab, that's the Somali Army's elite special forces unit, which is leading the campaign against Al-Shabaab. And our Africa correspondent, Andrew Harding, joined them in the town of Bukure to see what they were doing. This is the report.
Let's go.
These are Somalia's most battle-hardened troops, setting out before sunrise into a vast and furiously contested wilderness. All eyes alert for ambushes. This Special Forces unit, trained and funded by America, has spent years trying to crush an Islamist insurgency. And suddenly, in the midst of a terrible drought, they're making progress. We arrive in the ruins of a small town. A recent battle here saw the formidable militant group Al-Shabaab driven out.
We managed to kill 60 Al-Shabaab fighters. But right before we reached here, they fled the town. And right before they left, they have burned down everything. They destroyed the shops, the houses, the water wells. Like, the people right now do not even have clean water to drink.
This was your shop, was it? It was. But what's changed here is the mood. No longer of despair, but of determination. A popular uprising is underway. Locals telling us Somalia's drought has left them with no option but to help defeat the hated militants.
In the last month or so, these troops have captured vast amounts of territory here in the centre of Somalia, liberating dozens of villages. But the question, and it's always the question here in Somalia, is how long can they hold on to the territory? Or will the militants of Al-Shabaab simply melt away into the countryside and then return?
Al-Shabaab have hit back hard with a string of devastating bomb attacks, like this one in the capital Mogadishu. But listen to this politician who survived 5 attacks by the militants.
You see, when they were taking me.
So this is you on a stretcher?
Yeah.
He now believes the momentum has shifted.
Do you think this could be a turning point then against Al-Shabaab?
Sure, this is a turning point. I believe that if the government gets advantage of this opportunity, I think it will be the time that Al-Shabaab will be defeated.
That confidence is spreading fast. People in newly liberated areas no longer ruled by fear.
Can you put your hand up if you are glad that Al-Shabaab has been driven out of your village? That was quite remarkable to see a village like this with people finally ready to say, we're glad to see the back of Al-Shabaab, because they've terrorized villages across this region for so long. People have been too afraid to speak out. until now, it seems.
Will it last? Somalia still faces huge challenges. Millions here are living on the brink of famine. But if the war ends, then real progress could follow. Andrew Harding, BBC News, Central Somalia.
Back home now, and Cristiano Ronaldo is to leave Manchester United with immediate effect. The decision follows an outspoken interview in which the Portuguese star criticised the club and said that he had no respect for the manager, Erik ten Hag. Both sides said that Ronaldo's departure was mutually agreed, and it brings to an end Ronaldo's remarkable playing career at Old Trafford, as our sports correspondent Laura Scott tells us.
His first spell at Manchester United could hardly have gone better. After 6 years of success under Sir Alex Ferguson, he left a club legend. Cristiano Ronaldo's second stint, however, didn't work out so well. No trophies, no longer the main man, he said he felt pushed out. And after an explosive interview with Piers Morgan, the writing seemed to be on the wall.
Yes, I feel betrayed, and I felt that some people that don't want me here, not only this year, but last year too.
And he was highly critical of how he'd been treated by the manager, Erik ten Hag.
That's why I say I don't have respect for him, because he don't show me respect for me. This is why we are in that situation.
Any future at Old Trafford looked inconceivable, so it came as no surprise when Manchester United announced it was ending his £500,000 a week contract, 7 months early, by mutual agreement. Ronaldo, meanwhile, said he felt it was the right time to seek a new challenge. His next step will be captaining Portugal at the World Cup, but attention is already turning to what this ageing star with his sky-high wages will do on his return.
It depends what the motivation is. Is it Champions League? Is it money? Is it just to continue playing somewhere with a nice climate? This will be panned out and be going on behind the scenes, but we'll find out, I'm sure, in due course.
With Manchester United's owners, the Glazer family, tonight revealing they might sell the club, the turbulence at Old Trafford continues. Laura Scott, BBC News.
Now, the first state visit of the reign of King Charles is underway. The King and Queen Consort have welcomed the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, one of the chief negotiators of South Africa's transition to democracy. And he says he's hoping to use the visit partly to encourage more British investment in the South African economy. Our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell, reports now.
It is the ultimate in state hospitality, deployed for political, diplomatic and economic purposes. It is a state visit, the first of King Charles's reign, the first to take place since the pre-COVID days of 2019. The state visitor was President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa. For him, there was the full ceremonial welcome on horse guards, the guard of honour drawn up, the anthems playing. And then the carriage ride up the Mall, the mounted divisions of the household cavalry, the King, Queen Consort and the President in the Irish state coach, other ministers and officials following behind and into Buckingham Palace. There they viewed a display from the royal collection. President Ramaphosa picked up a photograph of Nelson Mandela with the late Queen. "You were lucky if you'd known them both," said the King. In the palace tonight, all the glitter and pomp of a state banquet, and a welcome in different African dialects.
Molweni, Nda. Wow. Mr. President.
But there were serious messages too. The King said the wrongs of the past must be acknowledged, and he called for concerted action on climate change. But above all, this was a demonstration of friendship.
I invite you all to rise and drink a toast to President Ramaphosa and to the people of South Africa. Nkosi Sikelel' iAfrika.
Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
first state visit of the King's reign. It's 20 to 11, and here's the weather with Susan.
Evening, Hugh. As areas of low pressure go, this one here in the Atlantic is something of a beaut, swirling around to the west of us at the moment. That's in the bank for tomorrow. Here we are right now with much clearer skies across the UK. It's turned chilly in some areas. There's some fog developing across Scotland and the northeast of England. Temperatures have dipped down close to freezing in mid-Wales at the moment as well, but they are going to start to lift overnight because that area of low pressure will start to kick up the winds, feed in the cloud, and the rain arrives into the southwest, Wales and Northern Ireland by the end of the night. So two very different starts to the day between the southwest and the northeast. But this front will work its way across all areas of the UK quite promptly, actually, through the morning, although tending to stall somewhat across Scotland through the afternoon. So some thicker cloud and more persistent rain around here. Elsewhere, it brightens up, but it stays very gusty. Gale force gusts around the Irish sea coast, and those winds are then going to feed in chains of pretty potent showers, some heavy, some thundery, accompanied by squally winds. In terms of temperatures, we're hitting around average values for the time of year this Wednesday, so a little milder than we saw at the start of the week. And if you haven't seen enough of wet and windy weather on Wednesday, well, here's Thursday. It looks pretty similar. This front on Thursday, though, perhaps not winging its way across the UK quite so quickly. If anything, it looks like it will sit towards the west for longer through the day on Thursday. Daylight hours in the east may be drier and brighter affairs, but the rain will make its way in to the eastern side of Scotland and England as we get into the evening. Temperatures on Thursday lifting up a little on the figures we've seen to start the week. But just to really sum things up for the next couple of days, here are our rainfall totals. Some areas in the west, particularly across South Wales, could be looking at up to 50 millimetres of rain. That's the best part of 2 inches, and I think all of us are going to be caught in at least a few sharp showers. Hugh, all
We've
yours.
been warned. Thank you, Susan. Thanks very much. Thanks to Susan there. That is BBC News at 10 on Tuesday, the 22nd of November. It's time now, of course, in just a second, to join all of our colleagues in the nations and regions who are standing by with the news where you are. There they are. Thank you very much. From the 10 team, thanks for watching. Good night.